Well, good morning. Let's do everybody, if you want, you don't have to, but everybody stand up for a second. Look around, find somebody you either don't know or haven't seen in a while, and just go say good morning to them, shake their hand, give them a hug. I said a hug or a word, not a whole conversation. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. Therefore I will hope in him. Now, I got to tell you, I only did that because I just wanted the opportunity to give Lillian a hug. I hadn't seen her in a while, and sometimes I do things for very selfish reasons, I'll be honest. Okay. We are glad you're here this morning. If you're visiting, I certainly hope you'll stick around a bit and give us a chance to get to know you, spend some time where the minister is not telling everybody to go sit back down. We've been looking at a series of self-help strategies. I don't know if that's a proper phrase, but not in the sense that there's anything we can do to help ourselves when it comes to salvation. I'm going to say that before every lesson. I've got today and 2 more to go, and I'll keep reminding you of that. That I do not want this to be perceived as these are the things that we do. All the heavy lifting's been done. Jesus Christ came, died for you. God stood by and watched his son die for you. That is the plan of salvation. What we're talking about is strategies we can do to become more like what God intended us to. I'm not talking about being forgiven. I'm not talking about earning grace. Grace can't be earned. We're solely talking about now that you are God's, now that you've been born again, now that you are part of his family, are there things that you can do that God wants you to do to become more and more like him? And we started off with Titus chapter 2. Oh, wait, before we go to that one. And we're taking, and I got to say this for every lesson too. I'm using a series of books. These are not necessarily recommended books or not unrecommended books. But they deal more with other aspects of our life than our spiritual life. But don't forget, all the aspects of your life are interconnected. If your room's a mess, I don't know how you focus on worshiping God. Because in the back of your head, you're thinking, man, I can't even keep my own room up, straightened up. What am I going to do with my spiritual life? So don't separate the different compartments of your life. We like to do that. This isn't this lesson, but I mean, isn't that what the Corinthians were doing? They're separating their religious life with their sex life, and led to all kinds of problems there. We're talking about, and so when I mention a book, I'm not saying read it or don't read it, but we're stealing some ideas from that part of our lives and applying them to other parts of our life. We started off with Titus chapter 2 and verse 11. And in that we looked at it, grace was revealed to all, but that grace is also training us to live godly lives. And so that's the part of our life we're in now. We are allowing God to train us. And in that training, we're looking at a number of different things. Last week, we looked at Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. And we looked at the book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. But we looked at the idea of stripping off the clutter. Putting every aspect of your spiritual life into a bundle and going through it and looking at it. I said spiritual life, putting everything in your life in a bundle, including your spiritual life, and going through that piece by piece and saying, is this something I need in my life, or is it just cluttering it up? Are these the things that bring me true joy? like the joy that was set before Jesus Christ that the author of Hebrews mentions. And then this morning, we're going to continue to look at Hebrews a little bit. But before we do, I want to talk about the book I'm going to use this morning. This one was submitted by Curtis. I think Curtis is going to be brought up a lot because he just went with the, he threw everything at me. I think he just went to Amazon and looked for every single book he could, from Skeletor to this one. But it's a book by Admiral, put his name up. There's Admiral William H. McRaven, U.S. Navy retired. It's called Make Your Bed. I read this one. I had not read it, hadn't really looked at it, but Curtis suggested it a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago. And at the same time, it was short. I honestly read it like in 2 hours, I think. Did not take me long to read. I want to mention the little subtitle he's got down there. Little Things That Can Change Your Life and Maybe the World. So that's the book we're going to be looking at this morning. Admiral McRaven was a Navy SEAL, and most of the book is based upon the lessons he learned during his 6 months in SEAL school. I don't remember if that's what he called it or not, but the training facility where the United States Navy turns sailors into SEALs. So in the book, he's got 10 chapters and he's got 10 things. I'm not going to talk about all those. I'm going to focus on these 4. And I'm not even doing them in the order he did them in. So we're going to talk about 4 things that he brought up that he learned during his time in the Navy SEALs, and more particularly during his time in those 6 months of becoming a Navy SEAL. So we're going to talk about never ever quit, life's not fair, give people hope, and make your bed. I know all you parents are just tickled to death that I'm finally talking about making beds. So, but before we get into those, let's go read Hebrews chapter 12, verses 4 through 13. And if you remember last week, we read verses 1 through 3, so we're picking up right where we left off, starting in verse 4 of Hebrews chapter 12, and I'm reading from the New Living Translation. After all, you have not yet given your lives in your struggle against sin. And have you forgotten the encouraging words God spoke to us as his children? He said, my child, don't make light of the Lord's discipline, and don't give up when he corrects you. For the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes each one he accepts as his child. As you endure this divine discipline, remember that God is treating you as his own children. Who ever heard of a child who is never disciplined by his father? If God doesn't discipline you as he does all of his children, it means that you are illegitimate and are not really his children at all. Since we respect our earthly fathers who disciplined us, shouldn't we submit even more to the discipline of the Father of our spirits and live forever? For our earthly fathers disciplined us for a few years, doing the best they knew how. But God's discipline is always good for us, so that we might share in his holiness. No discipline is enjoyable while it is happening. It's painful. But afterward, there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. So take a new grip with your tired hands and strengthen your weak knees. Mark out a straight path for your feet so that those who are weak and lame will not fall but become strong. Good words from the author of the book of Hebrews. Go to that next slide there, Connor. We're going to start with never ever quit. I'm going to reference Hebrews. And I'm also going to reference one other book of the Bible this morning. I'll save it so that you can sit out there and wonder which one's it going to be as I get closer and closer. But one of his chapters is entitled Never Ever Quit. Admiral McRaven made clear throughout the book that the whole point of SEAL training was to weed out those who couldn't make it. And after I read each chapter, the other point of his book is to remind me I would never be a Navy SEAL. I appreciate people who can go through that kind of training and physical discipline. I'm not even sure it was all legal. I'm sure some of it was exaggerated, but I'm thinking surely the government of the United States is not letting these people get eaten by sharks in the middle of the night. Now that maybe was an exaggeration on my part. I don't remember. I remember sharks. I remember night, and I remember the ocean and swimming. But their whole point was to get people to quit. That's their goal, because they don't want them to quit later, after they've made it, after the 6 months. One of the chapters, and it wasn't necessarily this one, but they start them off by showing them all they got to do to quit. All you got to do is come out here and ring this bell 3 times and you're out. No questions asked. We're not going to harass you. You just won't be a Navy SEAL. That was the whole point. No matter what they went through, every person there was there at their own free will. They could leave at any time, end whatever they were going through at any time. They just wouldn't be SEALs. There were things they went through that were life-threatening, humiliating. They were being pushed seemingly beyond their capabilities. But during all that time, they could stop it at any point. And I do think that's a little bit of a lesson for us. I told you, these lessons aren't about salvation. It's not about grace. It's not about mercy. It's about becoming a tool that God can use. And some of us are going to be, hammers, and some of us are going to be those little electric things they use on the roofs. And a lot of that has to do with what you go through, with how you've been disciplined and how you've been trained. God's discipline is always good for us. And this is right from Hebrews. We just read it. I'm just quoting it again. But God's discipline is always good for us so that we may share or might share in his holiness. The discipline that we go through as children of God is a discipline that is making us more and more holy. I wonder what I would have to go through to share in God's holiness. I think about a Navy SEAL, how prepared they are for combat, for thinking on their feet, for patience, for endurance. I think about what they must have gone through to be that prepared for their military lives. And I'm going to be honest, other than reading this book and watching TV, that's my only Navy SEAL experience. I've never met a Navy SEAL in real life. If somebody in here is a Navy SEAL, you can raise your hand and stop this lesson and come up. And obviously, I'm not going to question that. But, it just seems like they're that one person. If something happened in my life, I'd want a Navy SEAL there to fix it because they seem to know how to do that kind of stuff. They've been prepared for the worst scenarios they can think of. So when they're finally in the worst scenarios they can think of, they know how to handle them. God is going to prepare each one of us for something. And I would like to think that someday I can be, as the Hebrew writer says, I can share in God's holiness. But what does the training for that look like? What am I going to have to go through? The Bible describes 4 men who I believe were Navy SEALs. I don't even know if they could swim, to be honest. But these were men who went through training to become the very best that God had. And that was Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel. We are not going to read the whole book of Daniel. I'm just going to point to some chapters. You can read those on your own. But think about this. Nearing the end of his life, late in his life, Daniel is thrown into a den of lions. The lion's den. I mean, that's a term we still use today to describe a really bad situation. Oh man, we threw David into the lion's den. It implies something, doesn't it? How many of you have ever gone up to the big cat haven or a zoo? One of them jungle cats comes up close to you. I can remember being up there. I don't know what kids were up there. I remember Donnie, I think, was there. Our kids are probably pretty small. And I remember thinking, man, that's not enough cage material. That was my thought. I mean, this wasn't like San Diego Zoo. This was like, who's the welder? I'd like to see his credentials right now. That cat's coming up and, he's like here and there's a fence and then there's me and I'm backing up a little bit. Daniel was thrown into a lion's den. But think about what Daniel went through before that prepared him for the lion's den. These were 4 young men who were removed from their homes at a very young age. They were taken away from everything they knew and hauled off to a foreign land. They were told they had to do certain things that were against what they were taught to do growing up their whole lives, and they refused to do it. How scary is that? And, they went through that. They went through in chapter 2, they're all rounded up. We'll talk about some of these things as we go through here. In chapter 3, they're forced to bow down or not bow down. Chapter 4, there's more dreams to interpret. We finally get to chapter 6. There's a lion's den. Daniel was prepared. He was ready for the lion's den. He had already faced his seal skull, so to speak. His life had already been threatened multiple times. I've already gone through all this. I don't know what God has in store for you. I don't know what God has in store for me. But I am convinced that it's connected to your training. And the longer you last, the more godly you become. Let me put it to you this way. Who had the most important mission that God ever sent anybody on? It was Jesus Christ. Who lasted the longest? Who never quit? Every single one of us, in some way, has quit at some point. We've sinned. We've given up. We've been tempted beyond what we could bear. Matter of fact, it's the person who never gives in that is tempted the most because they have to keep going. If they locked me and Lillian up in 2 rooms up here, said, we're going to get the truth out of you, Lillian would be screaming over here for a while. I wouldn't even start. You want the truth? There's the truth. They'd get the bamboo out, and I give up. Not these 4 guys. They were pretty close to never, ever, well, I'm sure they never, ever quit. And I want everybody to understand, I'm not talking about God has some kind of tiered layers of his children. You're just his children. That's the saved state. God has adopted you. You are his children. But he does have missions for you. He does have things he wants you to accomplish. And what you can accomplish for God is somewhat connected. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to throw grace out of here. Some of the greatest things God has ever done is demonstrating grace in the lives of people who needed it the most. But he's also got tasks for us, and he's trying to prepare us for those. And that never quit attitude, never, ever quit. Listen to verse 11 again of Hebrews chapter 12. No discipline is enjoyable while it is happening. It's painful. But afterward, there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. If I had disciplined my body and was physically fit, I'd love going to the doctor. Doctor, give me the good news. Oh, Tim, you're a specimen of great health. Amen. But that's not what I did. I want each and every one of us to be able, I like the words that the Hebrew author hears, to have a peaceful harvest of right living. Doesn't that sound like a good life? Have a peaceful harvest of right living. What does it take to get there? Well, there's another word here, painful. It's going to be painful. Anyway, that's lesson 1. Never quit. Because what you're going through is shaping you for God's missions. Another chapter he had was life's not fair. And he makes this point in his book multiple times. But one of the things he says is you could be disciplined for something that you had done perfectly right. They just would randomly, and wake everybody up in the morning and check their beds. We'll get to make your bed later on. And maybe they don't find anybody that didn't do their bed right. So they'll just pick somebody at random because somebody's got to be disciplined. There's no way you're all this good. And his point in bringing that up was life's not fair. The sole purpose of those lessons was to teach those SEALs that life is not fair, that things happen. And it reminds me of Daniel chapter 2. Because if you remember in Daniel chapter 2, these 4 men are faced with a crisis that was not of their doing. It just happened. Life's not fair. In that chapter, King Nebuchadnezzar receives a dream. And this is the one that he wakes up, he's all disturbed. It's really bothering him. And so he goes to his own wise men and he says, hey, wise men, I need somebody to interpret my dream. And the wise men say, sure, tell us what the dream is, and we'll interpret it for you. Now, that seems fair. You want me to interpret a dream? Tell me what it is. He said, no, I'm not telling anybody what it is. And they say, well, how can we interpret it? Matter of fact, I love it. They use a phrase in there. They say, nobody walking on this earth can tell you a dream that you had. You got to tell it to us. And they basically admit that if you get a solution to this, it's not going to be from somebody who's on this earth. It's going to be from, and they use the phrase, only the gods can know that. Well, he doesn't like this answer. So you know what he does? He rounds up everybody. All the wise men, all get in a line. They're all heading to the, I think it's a dung heap, so where they're heading. Maybe that's the King James version. But he's going to kill them all. Because of these bozos that just, aren't doing what I want to do, everybody's getting killed. That's the essence of life's not fair. And when life's not fair, what do we tend to do? We complain about it. We gripe about it. We bemoan it. We do all kinds of things. And so the guy actually comes to Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego's abode to round them up. He is picking them up to go execute them. And they say, wait, why are we being executed? And he says, oh, you haven't heard? Here's the reason. And instead of saying, well, that's not fair, and complain, they say, well, hold on. Let's go talk to the king and see if we can just get one more day. We'll interpret it. We'll try our best to interpret his dream for him. And so they do. This isn't a lesson on Daniel chapter 2. Needless to say, dreams interpreted, all the wise men are spared. But they were prepared for that. Because what point of their life before chapter 2 had been fair anyway? Was it fair to these men that because of the sins of their ancestors, all of Israel was being hauled off to captivity? No. They were too young to be the reason for that. Was it fair to them that they stood up to the king because they were just standing up for their principles and almost got in trouble in chapter 1? No. But they learned that life wasn't fair. I can guarantee you, life's not fair. As my old biology teacher, Mr. Plogger, used to say, if life was fair, we'd die in the order we were born. And we don't, do we? Life's not fair. Life's not fair. Daniel's response wasn't to cry foul, but to go to the Lord with his friends, asking to be shown mercy by showing them the dream. He was ready for it. Another chapter entitled, Give People Hope. Give people hope. And this isn't even in my notes. I hope I'm remembering right. But one of the things they do at some point in these SEALs trainings, they take them to this place where mud's like this deep, and it's cold, and it's, I guess there's parts of San Diego that aren't warm and sunny like they try to make us think. And they put them out there, and they leave them out there for hours and hours and hours. And the author described a point where the guy next to him had enough, because all the trainers are just screaming and yelling, and you can stop it. You can come over here right now. We got hot chocolate. We got a warm fire. We got a cold or warm showers. Got the whole works. You just got to come out of that mud pit. And he said at one point, the guy next to him was leaving, and he tried to grab him. Look, you can't leave. And he was leaving anyway. Broke his grasp. And he was leaving anyway. And some other guy in the mud pit somewhere started to sing a song that he doesn't even mention what the song was. In fact, I think he says, I'm not going to repeat the words of the song here in this book. It was a song that gave those men hope, encouraged them to go on. Give people hope. The Hebrew passage talks about God's word of encouragement. He says, and have you forgotten the encouraging words God spoke to you as children? My child, don't make light of the Lord's discipline and don't give up when he corrects you. For the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes each one he accepts as a child. When you, in whatever capacity, are standing in a mud pit, going through tough times, facing a tough time, remember this, that God only disciplines those he loves. And if he didn't discipline us, what does he say? What does that say? One of the toughest chapters in all of Scripture is Daniel chapter 3, where he talked about the idea that life's not fair. And think about this. In Daniel chapter 3, which if you don't want to go look it up, it's the golden idol out on the plain. Everybody's got to bow down to it. And, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're going to get thrown in the fiery furnace. But in Daniel chapter 3, think about this. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are only there because God raised them to the positions that they had. Because of chapters 1 and chapters 2, chapter 1 to chapter 2, they are now put in positions of authority. And because they're in positions of authority, the king decides everybody who's in a position of authority throughout my whole empire needs to come out here and bow down to this golden image that I am going to erect. And so they do. So that's, I mean, that right there is not fair. But then they get there, trumpets sound. You can read that on your own listen. If what I'm talking about is something that's new to you, I would just stop listening to me right now and go read it. It's good stuff. Daniel chapter 3. But they blow the horns. Everybody bows down except for these three guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And then the king says, whoa, 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 whoa. I can't throw those guys in the fire. They're some of my best guys. Let's give them another chance. So they get another chance. Then we're looking at you this time. This is no longer just rumors of three guys. We're staring right at you. Again, horn sound, whatever happens, and they don't bow down. And the king is so upset, probably because he gave him a second chance. Oh, these are three of my wisest guys. They're not that stupid. You know, they'll bow down this time. No. The king's so upset, he increases the flames, has them thrown in the fire. You know, everybody's favorite part of the chapter. The guys who are carrying them to throw them into the fire all die because it's so hot. They throw them in there, and we'll talk about what happens in just a second. You know what interests me about Daniel chapter 3? Where's Daniel? I mean, chapter 1's got Daniel. Chapter 2's got Daniel. Chapter 4's got Daniel. Matter of fact, the rest of the book, you don't even see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego anymore. This is it for them. This is their last mention in the book of Daniel. Well, for those of you who are scholars who want to prove me wrong, you might be able to. I don't know. But they certainly don't play a central part after this. And it got me thinking, where is Daniel in all of this? Does that mean Daniel bowed down? I doubt it. I think the reason that this story is told to us from the perspective of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is because if it was just Shadrach, or if it was just Meshach, or if it was just Abednego, or even if it was just Daniel, I think they would have bowed down. There's strength to having companions. There's strength to giving each other hope. Yeah, life wasn't fair. They're going to get thrown in a fiery furnace. And there's some things said in Daniel chapter 3 that are amazing. I mean, you think about what these guys have gone through, and then they produce things like, King, we're not going to bow down to you. You can throw us in the fiery furnace. We know that our God will save us. And then they go on to say, but even if he doesn't, we're not bowing down. And so he threw them in there. And then something fascinating happens. The king, who's got dead guys lying around because, you know, it's so hot, he says, hey, how many guys did you throw in there? I think you miscounted. And I said, King, we just threw three guys in. Trust us. You know, we didn't want to expend any other energy. He says, well, there's four guys in there. They're all walking around. Nobody's bound up anymore. And one of them is all shiny. Looks like a son of God. Looks like one of the gods, I think he says. They all three stood together and were tossed in. And while in that furnace, that fourth figure appeared. We're never told who it was. I'm sure, though, of this, that fourth person showed up to give those other three guys hope, to encourage them, to remind them of everything they'd been through, and to let them know that they would get through that. Maybe that fourth person was somebody who died in some fiery furnace at some other location, and God sent him down, said, hey, I need somebody with some experience here. Maybe it was an angel. Some scholars think maybe it was Jesus Christ. I'm not a scholar. I don't pretend to be one. But there's some things said, you know, later on. Is it Peter that talks about where did Jesus go? And we all like to argue about that. Maybe Jesus, you know, went back to here to give these guys hope. Who knows? Who knows? But it was someone who had been prepared and sent by God to encourage three brave friends. Let me ask you this. What have you endured that God could use to give hope to others? Let me ask you another question. Are there people around us who need hope? Are there people facing tough times? Are there people who are facing things that just aren't fair? And the answer to all those questions is yes. I mean, I don't know how many people are here this morning, probably 100-ish. I know quite a few of you. I don't know some of you. And just looking around, I see people that need hope, that are enduring a lot, that are trying not to quit, but they need hope. I see others who've been there before, who could give them hope because they've already made it through, because God disciplined them. God disciplines us for a reason. And one of those reasons is so that we can give hope to others. The last chapter I want to talk about this morning is actually the title of the book and the first chapter of his book. But he stresses the importance of making your bed. John, I know SEALs have to make their bed every morning. Do Marines have to make their bed every morning too? Is no mornings off? Like you're going to catch an early flight? Or got to make it 4 or 5 times? Yes, I'm not a Marine either, as you can tell. He talks about that every morning. That's the first thing they did in the morning. They got up and they made their bed. They made it a specific way. They made it to specifications, and it got inspected every day. Every day. And he talks about the importance of that. That for the Navy SEALs, it started every day with a win, because there were going to be a lot of losses that day. There were going to be a lot of challenges that they didn't quite complete as they were supposed to, and they'd have to do them over and over. But making their bed became something that was very important to each sailor who was trying to become a Navy SEAL. What's your make your bed? I guess is the question. What's the one thing that you do every morning to start your day that sets you off on the right track? Is it a time of reflection or study or encouragement? Or is it like Daniel? Was it a time of prayer? You know, in Daniel chapter 6, when we get to the lion's den, I think sometimes we forget why he's in the lion's den. He's in the lion's den because they passed a law that said they could not pray, anybody but the king. And they passed that law because they were jealous of Daniel. They knew that every day he started by praying, facing Jerusalem and praying to his Lord, to his God. They knew that. They knew that. He was that regular about it. And so they passed a law that said you couldn't do that anymore. And what's the first thing he did? First day after the laws passed? He prayed. And he did it knowing what would happen. But he started that day off with a win. He started that day off with his Lord. He started that day off the same way he started all the others. I tried to do, it's been ages since I've done this, and I'm just going on memory here. But I think you can chart out about 70 years between when we first meet Daniel and this instance. And the first time we meet Daniel, he's called a young man. I've heard scholars say he's maybe mid-teens to late teens, somewhere in there. Daniel's probably at least 80-ish or older by this point. 80 years of waking up and praying. When he gets in the lion's den, you know what he did first? Same thing he did every day. He prayed. He prayed. And he came back out. Last week, I challenged you to start uncluttering your life. This week, I'm saying, let me challenge you. Let me challenge myself. Let's challenge each other. What's going to be your make your bed? Find that one action. And maybe you've already got it. Amen. But find that one action, a simple action, that starts off each day with a step in the right direction. Amen? I don't know why you're here this morning. Maybe some of you are here because you want God to shape you, to discipline you. You're the brave. You know, nobody signs up to be a SEAL without a certain amount of bravery already. Maybe that's you this morning. Maybe you're just here because this is one of the steps you always take in the right direction. I don't know what brought you here, but I do know that if you need any help, if you need encouragement, if you need hope, if you're going through something that's just not fair, if you feel like you're at the end of your rope and you're about to quit, and in some way we can help, or better yet, we can pray with you as you ask God for help. Let me go back to chapter 2. That's the first thing Daniel does, is he says, wait here, and he goes and asks his friends to pray while he beseeches God to tell him what the dream was. We'll do that with you. We'll get you anything you need if you come forward while you stand and sing.